The great lecture hall of the Galactic University buzzed like a hive. Voices of every pitch and frequency blended into a strange chorus. Clicking mandibles, bell-like tones, whispers that rippled like flowing water, deep growls that rumbled in the air. The room shimmered with shifting colors as light-bodied beings pulsed in nervous patterns, while others exhaled mists that drifted like smoke above the seats. Today was no ordinary class. Today, they would learn about the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever admitted to their halls. At the front of the chamber stood Jake Morrison. He looked painfully ordinary by human standards, messy brown hair, simple gray shirt, boots scuffed from travel. To the assembled aliens, though, he was something else entirely. The only human in the building. The only one of his kind most of them had ever seen, and that made him terrifying. Professor Zactor, a crystalline being whose body rang with soft wind chime notes, raised a tall limb and let it hum until silence fell. "Students," he said, his voice like glass struck gently. "Today is special. You will hear about the human species from a human himself." All eyes turned toward Jake, some with fear, some with fascination, all with unease. Jake gave a small, nervous wave. His teeth flashed as he smiled. The gesture, meant to be friendly, instead sent a ripple of shudders through the room. More than one student recoiled. To them, those flat white teeth looked like predatory fangs. A student with blue skin and gill-like ridges on her neck raised a cautious hand. Her name was Kira, a scholar from the ocean world Theles. "Our texts say Earth is a Class 12 death world," she said. "How did your people survive long enough to reach the stars?" Jake chuckled, a soft, almost embarrassed laugh. But to the aliens, it was a sound that vibrated with menace like a predator's growl. Several students flinched. "That's a fair question," Jake said, pressing a button on the console. A holographic sphere of blue and white blossomed above him, Earth as seen from orbit, glowing like a marble of light against the darkness. The aliens leaned forward. To them it looked beautiful, peaceful, a jewel in the void. Jake's eyes softened. "That's home, looks safe, doesn't it?" Murmurs rose through the hall. Sparkling seas, swirling clouds, green continents, it seemed inviting, safe, gentle. One insectal drone clicked its mandibles. "Our sensors say it is not safe at all. They say it kills." Jake's smile thinned. He tapped the console again. The image changed. A massive, twisting column of gray cloud reached from sky to earth, tearing across a plain, flinging houses into the air like toys. "This," Jake said calmly, "is a tornado." Gasps echoed across the chamber. "It's a tower of spinning air. Winds of 200 miles an hour, strong enough to rip trees from the ground, strong enough to throw a ship. We get about 1,000 every year." "Your air attacks you," whispered Whispersoft, a gaseous student whose glow dimmed in fear. Jake shrugged. "Sometimes, usually when you're eating lunch." The lecture hall erupted in a dozen alien sounds of disbelief. Clicking, chiming, hissing. But Jake wasn't finished. He pressed another button. A wall of water taller than skyscrapers surged toward a coastline. "This is a hurricane," he said. "Like a tornado, but bigger, winds of 150 miles an hour, waves as tall as buildings. It can wipe out entire regions." "How often?" asked Scalebright, a lizard-like alien whose scales turned pale yellow with worry. "Oh, several times a year," Jake said casually. The murmurs grew louder. Another image, snow and ice avalanching down a mountainside, swallowing everything. "This is an avalanche," Jake said. "Mountains drop all their snow at once, 80 miles an hour, whole towns disappear under it." A being made of living light flickered frantically. "You build your homes away from such horrors, yes." Jake laughed. The sound made them all recoil. "Actually, we build next to them. The view's nice." Silence. No one dared breathe. Jake's eyes swept the crowd, seeing fear reflected in every strange face. For the first time, he realized that what he thought of as normal was, to them, nightmare. He leaned forward, voice calm, steady. "Earth is dangerous, yes, but we adapted. We built stronger. We planned smarter. We survived. That's what humans do." Professor Zactor's crystalline tones quivered uneasily. Students whispered in dozens of tongues. The fear in the room was thick. But in the very back, shadowed by the lights, observers from the Galactic Council took notes. Their eyes never left Jake Morrison. And as Jake ended his lecture, whistling softly to himself, every student carried the same thought back to their worlds. If this was just Earth's weather, what else were humans hiding? By dawn of the second day, the Galactic University was already overflowing. Word of Jake Morrison's first lecture had spread like fire through the student halls and beyond the campus walls. Beings who had never attended a single xenobiology class now packed themselves into the massive chamber. Some clung to the walls with clawed feet. Others hovered on wings or floated in containment spheres. More still watched through suspended holoscreens in the courtyards outside. And yet, as Jake entered, steaming mug of coffee in hand, he looked more like a tired teacher than the terrifying apex survivor of a Class 12 Deathworld. "Morning," he said cheerfully, his voice echoing across the chamber. The reaction was immediate. Dozens of aliens flinched as he sipped from the cup. The steam rising from the dark liquid made them recoil. To many, the idea of ingesting boiling fluid was unthinkable madness. Professor Zactor's crystalline body gave an uneasy chime. Perhaps we should prepare the new arrivals," he whispered. Jake grinned, setting his mug on the desk. "Nah, they'll be fine." He tapped the console. The hologram above him flickered, shifting from Earth's image to an angry ocean. Waves pounded against jagged cliffs, exploding into spray that towered higher than buildings. "This," Jake began, "is our ocean, and this is it on a normal day, calm by our standards." A ripple of disbelief spread through the chamber. Kira, the ocean-born student with soft blue skin, leaned forward. Her large black eyes blinked slowly. "Normal, those waves look violent." Jake chuckled. "That's the ocean's way of saying hello." The students shifted uneasily. Flow River, a liquid-bodied being seated near the front, rippled in distress. "Your water is always hostile." "Always moving, always pulling, always eroding," Jake said. "Given enough time, the ocean will tear down mountains. That's just how it works." He tapped again. The image shifted. Now storm waves filled the screen, towering 60 feet high, rolling like walls of liquid night. "These are storm waves, fast enough to outrun ships, strong enough to break steel. One of these can sink a vessel the size of a city." Scalebright's scales had gone completely white now. Her voice shook. How do you cross such water?" Jake shrugged. "Carefully, we build ships, big ones, and sometimes the ocean wins." Gasps and fearful murmurs echoed. Whispersoft, the gaseous being, flickered dimly. "Surely you avoid it when you can." Jake's grin widened. "Actually, we swim in it for fun." The hall erupted. Half the students shouted in disbelief. Others emitted terrified sounds, clicks, hums, high-pitched tones. Tiny wings, no bigger than Jake's hand, fainted midair and was caught by a neighbor. Jake raised his hands, calming them. "We don't always survive by running from danger. Sometimes we face it head-on." He tapped the console again. The screen shifted to show a vast, white expanse. A glacier, miles of frozen water, inching slowly down a valley. "When water gets cold, it becomes solid," Jake explained. "It grows heavy, it moves as rivers of ice. Nothing can stop it, it carves mountains apart." Shimmer Dance, a being made of living light, flickered rapidly. "Moving, frozen water." Jake nodded. "Glaciers, icebergs, entire mountains of frozen water floating in the sea. Ships have to avoid them or they sink." He flicked to the image of a great ship with a torn hull disappearing beneath black waves. "This actually happened. The Titanic. 1,500 lives lost." A stunned silence spread. Kira's voice trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "Your oceans kill you, your ice crushes you, your storms hunt you. How do you live with it?" Jake's eyes softened. "We learned to adapt. We learned to respect the danger, to study it, to prepare. That's how we survived." The screen shifted again. Snow buried entire cities, wind carving white walls across empty streets. "Sometimes," Jake said, "the cold buries our homes in storms we call blizzards. The air itself freezes you, minutes and you're gone." Several students recoiled, clinging to one another. "And yet," Jake continued, "we live there, we play there, we ski down mountains of snow for fun." Professor Zactor rang with nervous notes. "Fun," he repeated weakly. Jake raised his mug of coffee again, sipping casually. "Danger doesn't stop us from living." The council watches. At the back of the hall, the observers from the Galactic Council shifted uneasily. They recorded every word, every image. Their faces betrayed no emotion, but their silence weighed heavily. One of them, a tall, armored being with obsidian skin, leaned to another. "Do you see? They embrace danger, they revel in it. These creatures are weapons waiting to be aimed. The other responded softly, or perhaps they are proof of resilience, a species tempered by its world. Neither took their eyes off Jake. The last image. Jake tapped one final time. The screen filled with a wall of water taller than a city rushing inland, devouring everything. This is a tsunami. When the ground shakes beneath the sea, the ocean rises up. One wave can travel 500 miles per hour. It can swallow nations. The hall filled with horrified cries. "Your earthquakes make your water attack you," Scalebright whispered. Jake finished his coffee and smiled. On Earth, everything's connected. One danger makes another. We live with it because we have no choice. He paused, his voice softening. But it taught us something important. We survive together. Alone, none of us would last long, but together, we can endure anything. For the first time, silence was not filled with fear, but with thought. Some aliens glanced at each other, uneasy yet curious. Kira's eyes lingered on Jake. She felt a strange pull, a mixture of fear and admiration. Perhaps humans were not monsters. Perhaps they were survivors. The interruption. A sharp tone rang out. The door at the back of the lecture hall slid open with a hiss. 2 council guards entered, their armor gleaming, their faces expressionless. They moved with the heavy authority of those who spoke for governments, not classrooms. Professor Zactor froze, his crystalline body going still. The students quieted instantly. The lead guard's voice was cold. "Professor Morrison, the council requests your presence immediately." Jake raised an eyebrow. Now. The hall buzzed with whispers, fear spreading like fire. Jake gathered his datapad slowly, calmly. He turned back to the students, flashing another smile. "Don't worry, tomorrow we'll talk about the creatures that live in our oceans. You'll like them, they're fascinating." The word fascinating sent another ripple of terror across the hall. As Jake followed the guards out, the council observers rose silently and disappeared behind him. Kira felt her chest tighten. Something about the guards' tone had chilled her. This was not just a meeting, this was judgment. And for the first time, the thought took root. What if the galaxy decided humans were too dangerous to be allowed among them? The council chamber was carved into the heart of a crystalline spire that towered over the city. Its walls shimmered with inner light, refracting into colors that danced across the vaulted ceiling. Normally, it was a place of calm debate, where ambassadors and scholars settled disputes with measured tones and careful words. Today, that calm was gone. Jake Morrison stood alone at the center of the circular platform, surrounded by tiers of alien delegates. Hundreds of eyes, lenses, feelers, and sensory tendrils focused on him. Each representative wore the insignia of their world, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and thinly veiled fear. Kira sat in the upper rows among the students allowed to observe. Her hands trembled as she gripped the railing. Yesterday, Jake's words had left her shaken, but also strangely moved. Today, she feared the galaxy might never let him speak again. Professor Zactor's crystalline form glowed beside her, his notes ringing with nervous tremors. "They are not here to learn," he whispered. "They are here to decide." The council speaks. High Chancellor Vaynar, a tall obsidian-skinned being whose voice echoed like grinding stone, raised a hand. "Human," Vaynar intoned, his voice amplified so all could hear. "You stand accused of spreading fear throughout this institution. Your lectures describe horrors unfit for peace. The council demands to know, are your claims true?" Jake crossed his arms loosely, his expression unreadable. Every word. A ripple of unease spread across the chamber. A delegate of the plenary, traders with silken robes and eyes like liquid silver, leaned forward. "Why would you admit such chaos? Do you wish to intimidate our young, to make them fear your kind?" Jake shook his head. "I told them the truth, that's all. My planet is dangerous, yes, but it shaped us. It taught us how to survive. It taught us compassion." The word seemed to strike the chamber like a spark in dry grass. Murmurs broke out instantly. Compassion, from a Deathworld species. An armored delegate of the Vorkth rumbled, his bulk shaking the benches. "Compassion cannot be born of storms and predators. Only cruelty comes from such places." Jake's jaw tightened. "Then you don't understand us." "Propaganda." A council aide stepped forward with a shimmering panel of light. Images appeared above Jake. Mushroom clouds blooming into the sky, burning cities, humans in uniforms marching across battlefields. The chamber gasped. These, the aide said coldly, are records from your own archives. Entire wars, millions dead, machines of destruction unlike anything the galaxy has seen in 10,000 years, weapons that poison worlds for centuries. The images shifted. Skeletal ruins of Hiroshima, trenches of World War I, bombs dropping, cities flattened. The aide's voice was merciless. Is this compassion? Is this your survival? Or is it proof that humanity is violence incarnate? Kira flinched as whispers spread around her. Students shifted uncomfortably, their faces pale with fear. Professor Zactor's body dimmed to a low chime. Jake stood tall, but his eyes flickered with pain. Yes, we've done terrible things, we've fought wars, we've built weapons we should never have touched. The murmurs grew louder, delegates nodded grimly. This was what they had feared. Jake's voice rose, but you don't see the whole picture. He tapped the console in front of him. New images appeared, humans digging survivors out of rubble, carrying children through floodwaters, scientists in labs developing vaccines, engineers building earthquake-resistant buildings. We made mistakes, we killed, but we also healed. Every war taught us why peace mattered more. Every disaster taught us to rebuild stronger. Every sickness forced us to discover medicine. The chamber quieted. Even the harshest delegates paused. Kira speaks. Kira's heart pounded. She knew she should stay silent. Students never spoke at hearings, but something inside her rebelled. She stood, her voice trembling but clear. Esteemed counsel, I was there. I heard him speak. He did not frighten us because he wished to. He frightened us because the truth itself is frightening. But, she swallowed, her throat dry. But he also showed us something we have forgotten, that danger can teach, that survival can unite. Gasps spread. Several delegates turned toward her, scandalized. A student had spoken in the chamber. But Jake met her eyes, and for a moment his weary smile softened. The accusation. High Chancellor Vaynar's stone voice cut through the chamber. And yet, the fact remains. Humanity has unleashed devastation upon itself again and again. You admit this. How then can such a species be trusted among the stars? Jake's hands clenched into fists. He thought of Earth, the scars left by war, the graves of the fallen, the quiet strength of those who rebuilt from ashes. His voice, when it came, was steady. Because we chose compassion anyway. We chose to build hospitals in the ruins. We chose to feed strangers when we had nothing left. We chose to help each other. Every time the world tried to end us, we decided not just to survive, but to care. The silence that followed was heavy. The council delegates stared down at him, their expressions unreadable. For a moment, Kira dared to hope. The reveal. Then the aide tapped the console again. The images changed. Not storms, not predators, not even wars. But vast underground silos, missiles lined up like silent spears, nuclear warheads waiting, biological weapons sealed in glass containers, viruses engineered to kill. The chamber gasped again, louder this time. These, the aide said slowly, are your greatest achievements, machines to erase entire worlds, diseases crafted to spread like fire. You say you are compassionate, but you build extinction into your bones. Vaynar's obsidian form leaned forward. His voice was a hammer striking stone. Tell us, human, how can the galaxy trust a species that toys with its own annihilation? Jake's throat tightened. He had faced storms, beasts, even battlefields. But nothing felt heavier than the silence of that chamber and the eyes of the galaxy judging his kind. Kira's breath caught. For the first time, she felt the weight of fear not just for him, but for herself, for everyone. If the Council declared humans too dangerous, there would be no appeal. They could exile Earth forever, or worse. The chamber was silent, waiting for Jake Morrison's answer. The chamber's silence lingered like a heavy fog. Hundreds of alien delegates sat frozen, their eyes still locked on the terrible images of humanity's weapons. Bombs powerful enough to scorch continents, viruses invisible yet lethal. Jake Morrison stood alone in the center of the chamber, sweat beating at his temple. He had faced storms that tore cities apart, and yet this judgment, the quiet weight of alien eyes, pressed harder than any hurricane. He opened his mouth to speak. And then the alarms began. The sky turns black. A shrill wail cut through the crystalline chamber. The walls themselves shifted in tone, vibrating with deep warning notes. Professor Zactor stiffened, his crystalline body ringing like a struck bell. No, not here, not now. Panels of light flickered into being across the chamber. Outside the towering spire, the sky had turned a deep greenish-black. Clouds spun in unnatural spirals. Lightning forked across the horizon, jagged and violent. Winds screamed between the city's crystal towers, bending support struts that had stood unshaken for centuries. "It cannot be," one delegate whispered. "Our weather control arrays are flawless. Nothing like this should happen." Another shouted in panic, "The dome is failing." The room dissolved into chaos. Instinct. Jake's head snapped toward the displays. He didn't see alien towers or glittering spires. He saw storm fronts. He saw collapsed lines. He saw the same kind of fury Earth spat out every season. He didn't hesitate. "Everyone listen to me?" His voice cut across the chamber, sharp and commanding. It wasn't a plea. It was an order. Some delegates bristled. Others froze. But his tone carried the weight of survival born in chaos. "The outer supports will fail first," Jake barked, pointing at the hologram of the city. "You've got a wind shear twisting against your dome struts. When they go, the shards will come down like blades." A liquid-bodied delegate rippled with panic. "We must flee the chamber." Jake snapped back. "You run now, you die crushed in the streets. Stay low, stay together, brace the supports, and you'll live." Several delegates stared, stunned. How could a human know this? Because Jake thought grimly. On Earth, he had learned the rules by watching cities crumble. Taking command, he sprinted up the steps, grabbing two stunned guards. "Where's your maintenance access?" The guards hesitated. Jake snarled, "Show me now, or you'll have corpses for counselors." Fear broke their hesitation. They led him to a panel along the chamber wall. With quick motions, Jake tore away the locking clamps, exposing the inner struts of the dome, long crystalline beams thrumming with strain. He pressed his palms against the cold surface, feeling the vibration. His instincts screamed at him. "Pressure's building, too much flex. When it snaps, it'll cut this spire in half." Delegates began to rise, voices breaking into panic. Some crackled in high-pitched wails. Others shrieked in insectal clatter. A few simply froze in place, unable to comprehend. Jake turned, his voice booming. "You want to live? Then do exactly what I say." The human way. He grabbed a heavy guard's pike, wedging it across the flexing crystal beam. "We brace it. Anything long, anything strong, jam it in and take the load." Professor Zactor's chimes rang nervously. "That is not approved protocol." Jake shot him a glare. "Your protocols don't care if you live or die. This does." Aliens hesitated, then slowly began to act. A Vorkth warrior tore free his ceremonial staff and shoved it into the beam beside Jake's. A Plenari unwrapped his metal-banded trade ledger and slid it into place, even a gaseous being condensed part of their mass into a hardened column. Piece by piece, the beam groaned, then steadied. Jake's muscles strained as he pushed, teeth grit. "Good, now reinforce the next one, move." The chamber, once filled with paralyzing debate, now moved like a living organism. Delegates scrambled, jamming objects into supports, following Jake's shouted commands. For the first time, the galaxy wasn't arguing, it was working together. Kira's choice. In the upper gallery, Kira's chest tightened. Fear churned inside her like a rising tide. The walls were trembling, fractures spread like spiderwebs through the crystal. If the dome failed, shards would rain like knives. She could run, she could hide. But her gaze fixed on Jake, standing against the beam with sweat pouring down his face, every muscle taut, voice unbroken. Without thinking, she leapt down the stairs, pushing past other students. She grabbed a length of fallen support rod and jammed it into place beside him. Jake glanced at her, breathless but grinning. "Good choice." Her throat felt dry. "You act like you've done this before." "I have," Jake said simply. "Too many times." The collapse. The storm outside intensified. Lightning hammered the dome in blinding flashes. The chamber shuddered with every strike. Then came the sound Jake dreaded most, a sharp crystalline crack. "Brace," he roared. One of the upper supports split, shards raining like falling glass. Delegates screamed. A massive piece tumbled toward the crowd. Jake lunged, tackling Kira out of the way as the shard exploded against the floor where she had stood. The impact echoed like thunder. He rolled to his feet, dragging her up. "Stay with me." Professor Zactor's chimes rang in panic. The Western struts are failing. Jake's eyes darted to the displays, his gut twisted. If they couldn't hold those beams, the entire dome would shatter. Thousands would die. And he only had seconds. He turned to the council, his voice raw, desperate, commanding. "You want to know why humans survive? You're about to find out. Now get everyone into the lower chambers before the dome comes down." Delegates froze, still unsure whether to obey him, still caught between fear and disbelief. The chamber groaned, crystals screaming under the strain. The sky outside boiled with lightning and storm. Jake grabbed the nearest support with bleeding hands, bracing it with everything he had. He shouted again, his voice echoing like a war cry. "Move, damn it, move!" The dome above cracked wider, and a shower of shards rained down. Before the entire chamber plunged into chaos. The storm roared like a living beast. The crystalline dome above the council chamber buckled and groaned, fractures spreading in jagged lines of light. Lightning slammed into the city towers outside, throwing the skyline into blinding flashes. Every strike was answered by a shudder that rattled the chamber's bones. Delegates shrieked and panicked in a dozen languages. Some clung to the railings, others cowered beneath benches, a few simply froze in place, trembling. Centuries of peace had taught them to trust systems, technology, and protocols. None of them knew what to do when those systems failed. But Jake Morrison did. Command in chaos. "Everyone down," Jake bellowed, his voice cutting through the panic. Shards of crystal rained from above, slamming into the floor like jagged spears. Jake shoved Kira behind a support column, shielding her with his body as a slab shattered nearby. Professor Zactor's crystalline tones rang in terror. "The whole dome will collapse." "Not if we keep it standing," Jake snapped. He turned to the council guards. "Where are your lower maintenance corridors?" The guards hesitated, stunned. Jake's voice became a growl. "Now, or you'll be corpses in 10 minutes. One finally pointed toward a side passage. Jake nodded sharply. "Good, get the students moving. Keep them low, keep them calm. Anyone collapses, carry them." His commands were raw, almost brutal, but they carried the weight of survival instinct. For a moment, the guards looked as if they might argue. Then another crack thundered through the dome, and they obeyed. Improvised engineering. Jake grabbed a fallen shard of support beam, wedged it against a trembling strut, and leaned in with his full weight. The beam groaned but held. He turned, shouting to the delegates. "Find anything strong, staffs, rods, panels, jam them into the supports, brace them." A plenary trader clutched his ornate ledger chest, horrified. "This is not procedure." Jake's glare was ice. "Procedure doesn't care if you die, this will keep you alive, do it." The trader froze, then slowly pushed the chest into place. Others began to follow, one by one. A Vorkth warrior shoved his warstaff against the strut. A gas being condensed its form into a solid pillar. A student tore the railing from the gallery and braced it. Piece by piece, the dome stopped screaming quite so loudly. Lessons from a death world. Kira stood beside Jake, her blue skin shimmering with fear. Her gilled neck flared as she gasped, unused to the crushing pressure of terror. Yet her hands moved without hesitation, dragging debris into place, reinforcing struts. You act like this is normal," she said breathlessly. Jake gave a bitter laugh. "On Earth, this is Tuesday." Her eyes widened. "You've faced this before. Storms, quakes, floods, fires, take your pick." He shoved another beam into place. "Our planet doesn't care if we live or die, so we learn to fight back." Kira blinked, stunned. "How?" Jake met her eyes. Even through sweat and blood, his smile was grim but steady. "We plan, we improvise, we never stop moving, and when everything tries to kill us, we learn the one lesson that matters most." He hauled another shard into place, grunting. "We survive together." Alien panic. Around them, chaos still boiled. A delegation of light beings flickered frantically, unable to coordinate. A cluster of insectal drones scuttled in circles, their wings buzzing in panic. A massive, armored beast tried to push through the exit, blocking others. Jake surged forward, his voice sharp as a whip. "Stop fighting each other, move in groups, small ones, he pointed at the beast. "Hold the rear, protect them." The beast froze, then obeyed. lowering its bulk to shield others from falling shards. Jake barked again. You, he jabbed a finger at the drones. Fly ahead, clear the way, no stragglers. The drones buzzed uncertainly, then took off in formation. Slowly, impossibly, the chaos began to take shape. Kira's realization. As Kira dragged another beam into place, she found her gaze locked on Jake. His face was pale, streaked with sweat and dust. His shirt was torn where Crystal had cut him. But his eyes never lost focus. He wasn't just surviving, he was leading. This was why humans were feared. Not their weapons, not their storms. But this refusal to surrender, this ability to drag others with them through the jaws of death. And she felt something else too, a dangerous thought. Maybe the galaxy needed that kind of madness. Turning the tide, another massive crack split the chamber. A section of the dome sagged, threatening to give way entirely. Jake didn't hesitate. He sprinted, leaping onto the fractured platform, pressing his shoulder into the beam. His body shook under the weight. "Reinforce here," he shouted. "Now." Dozens of aliens rushed forward, slamming objects into place. Supports groaned, then steadied. For one terrifying moment, Jake's knees buckled. Kira rushed beside him, pressing her slender frame against the beam. She was small, weaker, but her presence steadied him. Together they held. The dome screamed, then stopped. The worst of the strain had passed. The aftermaths. The storm still raged outside, but the dome no longer groaned with collapse. Lightning flashed, rain hammered, but the structure held. Inside the chamber, silence fell. Dozens of species stared at Jake Morrison, not with fear, but with something new. Respect. Kira stood beside him, chest heaving, her blue skin flushed. Around them, supports bristled with improvised bracing, traitor chests, staffs, railings, even living bodies condensed into pillars. It was ugly, makeshift, desperate. But it had worked. Jake leaned against the beam, exhausted, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. He looked up at the silent chamber and gave a crooked smile. That, he panted, is how humans survive. The antagonist strikes. The moment of awe didn't last. From the far side of the chamber, a voice rang out, deep, venomous. This proves nothing. Delegates turned. A tall, obsidian-skinned counselor, Chancellor Vaynar himself, rose to his full height. His voice boomed across the chamber like cracking stone. You see, he commands you. He bends you to his will. He makes you fight storms that should never touch us. He is not a teacher. He is a weapon disguised as a man. Murmurs spread again, this time darker. Fear began to return, creeping back like smoke into the room. Jake straightened, his muscles trembling with exhaustion. His eyes met Vaynar's, sharp and unflinching. And Kira, standing beside him, felt the shift. The survival they had just lived through, the proof of humanity's resilience, was already being twisted into propaganda. The storm outside was fading. But the storm inside the chamber was only beginning. The storm had passed, but the echoes remained. The crystalline dome still dripped with cracks, patched with desperate braces. The chamber floor was littered with shards. Delegates stood in stunned silence, their bodies trembling from the brush with death. In the center of it all stood Jake Morrison, bruised, bloodied, exhausted. He leaned against a broken beam, chest rising and falling like a runner at the end of a marathon. His simple shirt was torn and streaked with dust, his hands raw and bleeding from forcing supports into place. And yet the dome had held. For a heartbeat, silence carried something new, admiration. Dozens of alien eyes lingered on him, no longer with fear, but with quiet respect, some even with awe. But then the silence shattered. Vaynar's voice. Chancellor Vaynar rose, his obsidian form towering over the chamber. His voice was deep as grinding stone, heavy with authority. You see it now, he boomed. This human commands you. He forces you into danger. He makes you bend to his will. You obeyed him like soldiers on a battlefield. Do you not see the truth? This is not survival. This is domination. The murmurs began instantly. He ordered us. He shouted like a warlord. He thrives in chaos. Fear, once broken by necessity, slithered back into their voices. Vaynar's obsidian eyes burned. This is what humanity is, not teachers, not allies, but weapons, creatures of war who bring storms with them. His words spread like poison. twisting the narrative. Hollow panels flickered back to life. Images replayed, Jake bracing beams, shouting commands, aliens obeying. But the angle changed. With Vaynar's commentary, the story twisted. See how he barks orders. See how we obey as if enthralled. This is not cooperation, this is control. Delegates nodded uneasily. The respect in their faces began to erode, fear creeping back into their eyes. Jake pushed himself upright, glaring. His voice was hoarse but steady. I wasn't commanding. I was keeping you alive. You would all be dead if you hadn't listened. Exactly, Vaynar roared. We would be dead without him. Does that not prove our weakness and his danger? The chamber rippled with unease. Kira's whisper. In the upper rows, Kira's chest tightened. Her people had always feared storms, always built safe homes in calm seas. She had felt the terror when the dome cracked, when shards fell like knives. But she had also felt Jake's shoulder press against hers, holding the beam, refusing to yield. He had saved her life more than once now. She leaned toward Professor Zactor, whispering urgently, They twisted. They don't see what I saw. He saved us. Zactor's crystalline tones dimmed. Truth matters little when fear has already chosen its shape. Kira clenched her fists. She wanted to scream, to shout, to stand for Jake, but the chamber was no place for students. Not yet. Jake's flaw. The council's guards closed in. Heavy, armored figures moved to surround Jake, their weapons gleaming with dormant energy. Vaynar's voice thundered. Until this council decides, you will be held. Humanity will be examined. If your kind is deemed too dangerous, your worlds will be barred from the stars. Gasps spread, a death sentence for Earth's hopes. Jake didn't resist as the guards gripped his arms, but his eyes lowered, shadows flickering behind them. Kira saw it from her seat. The strength in his posture didn't match the heaviness in his eyes. For the first time, she saw not just the fearless teacher or the stubborn survivor. She saw the soldier who had lost too much already. Later, in the holding chamber deep beneath the spire, she found him. The room was small, walls of smooth crystal that pulsed faintly with energy. Jake sat on the bench, hands clasped, head lowered. His body was still strong, but his shoulders sagged as if the weight of the galaxy pressed down on them. Kira slipped past the guards, her ocean blue eyes wide. Jake. He looked up, forcing a crooked smile. Didn't think visitors were allowed. I asked, they said students don't matter, her voice shook. So I came. Jake gave a dry chuckle. Sounds about right. Kira stepped closer. Why do you let them speak of you like that? Why don't you fight back harder? Jake's smile faded. His eyes darkened, distant. Because I've seen what happens when I fight too hard. Back home, I was a soldier, did what I had to. Watched friends die. Watched civilians caught in the middle. I was good at surviving, but I wasn't good at saving everyone. His hands clenched, knuckles white. Sometimes I wonder if they're right. Maybe we are too dangerous. Kira's throat tightened. She wanted to reach for him, but her hands trembled. No, I was there. You didn't dominate us. You saved us. There's a difference. Jake looked at her, his eyes raw. Then why does it feel the same? Shadows gather. Above them, the council chamber burned with argument. Delegates shouted, their voices carrying through the spire. Some demanded humanity's exile. Others whispered of possibilities, alliances, survival knowledge, shared strength. Vaynar, though, was winning. His voice carried weight, heavy and commanding. Fear was easier to believe than hope. Professor Zactor argued in Jake's defense, but his crystalline tones were drowned beneath the council's storm. The message. The debate was cut short by a piercing alarm. The chamber's central display lit up with urgent red glyphs. Priority alert, the system voice intoned. Unstable object detected in neighboring system. Trajectory confirmed, asteroid impact imminent on colony world Veles Prime. Gasps filled the chamber. Delegates turned pale, their voices collapsing into frantic murmurs. A projection appeared, a massive asteroid kilometers wide tumbling through the void. Its path was clear. It would strike Veles Prime within days. No time for evacuation. Our defenses are not prepared. Millions will die. Panic spiraled. The counselors looked at each other, horrified, but none had a plan. None even knew where to begin. Far below in the holding chamber, Jake lifted his head. He could hear the alarms echoing faintly through the crystal walls. His instincts sharpened instantly. He knew that sound. He knew that tone. Kira's voice was hushed. "What is it?" Jake's eyes narrowed. His voice was quiet, grim. "Something big, something bad." The door burst open. Guards rushed in, faces pale, voices trembling. "Human, on your feet. The council demands your presence immediately." Jake stood slowly, bloodied hands curling into fists. His exhaustion was gone. His eyes were cold, sharp, alive. Because if the galaxy's greatest council had no answers, then once again it would fall to a human. The council chamber pulsed with alarm glyphs. Delegates shouted in overlapping panic, their voices a storm louder than any thunder. The projection of the asteroid loomed above them, tumbling endlessly, its jagged form larger than mountains. Its path was clear. It would strike Veli's prime in 3 days. The colony held over 30 million souls. "We cannot evacuate in time. Our defense satellites are insufficient. The shockwave will obliterate the entire hemisphere." Fear ruled the chamber. Centuries of peace had dulled their instincts. They knew diplomacy. They knew trade. They did not know survival against a rock from the void. And then the doors opened. Jake Morrison strode into the chamber, flanked by guards. His shirt was torn, his hands still bandaged, but his eyes burned with focus. Behind him walked Kira, her slender frame trembling yet unyielding. The voices fell silent. "The proposal." Jake stopped in the center of the circle, beneath the looming image of the asteroid. He let the silence stretch, his gaze sweeping across the terrified faces. "You're wasting time," he said flatly. "That thing doesn't care about your debates. It's coming, and unless you act, millions will die." Chancellor Vaynar's obsidian form rose. His voice was gravel. "And what would a human do, Deathworlder? Shout at it until it moves." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, but it died quickly under Jake's glare. "No," Jake said coldly, "I'd break it." The room stilled. He tapped the console, pulling up schematics of the colony, the asteroid, the nearby defense grid. His hands moved with soldier's precision, overlaying angles, calculating velocities. "You've got defense satellites, mining vessels, orbital stations, all useless if you don't use them together. But if you do," he tapped a series of points, "we can break it into smaller fragments before it hits atmosphere, turn one unstoppable killer into pieces your shields can handle." Murmurs spread, some hopeful, some skeptical. Vaynar sneered, "You speak as if it is simple. It is not." Jake met his gaze, unflinching. "On Earth, we've been killed by rocks from space before. Dinosaurs ruled for 165 million years. One asteroid ended them in a day. If we don't want Veli's prime to end the same way, we act now." The council divides. Debate erupted again, but this time voices shifted. Some delegates shouted for immediate evacuation. Others demanded caution. But more than a few looked at Jake with dawning realization. The High Chancellor's voice thundered above them all. "And if we follow you, human, if we obey again, then you prove my point. You are a commander of destruction, a weapon to turn against the galaxy." Jake's voice dropped, quiet but sharp as a blade. "No, I'm not a weapon, I'm a man. And I'm offering you a choice. Learn how to survive or watch millions die because you were too afraid to try." The chamber fell silent again. And then Kira rose. Her voice trembled but carried across the tears. "I will go with him." Every head turned. She stood tall, her ocean blue skin shimmering with conviction. "I was in the dome when it cracked. I saw him hold the beam with his bare hands. I saw him save lives when the rest of us froze. He is not our enemy. He is the teacher we need." Her words rippled through the chamber like a wave. For the first time, fear gave way to something else. Hope. The mission. Within hours, Jake stood on the bridge of a mining vessel, staring at the projection of the asteroid filling the viewscreen. A swarm of defense ships, satellites, and converted freighters moved into position, their crews trembling but determined. Kira stood at his side, her gills flaring with nervous breaths. "Are you sure this will work?" Jake gave a crooked smile. "Nope, but that never stopped us before." He turned to the crews, his voice firm. "This isn't about perfect plans. This is about adapting. You're going to panic. Things will go wrong, that's fine. When they do, you don't freeze, you adjust, you fight, you survive together." The comm channels filled with nervous affirmations. Jake's chest tightened. They reminded him of young soldiers, wide-eyed before their first battle. But this time, he wasn't going to let them walk blind into death. The impact. The asteroid loomed larger. Defense satellites opened fire, lances of energy carving into its surface. Explosions burst across the rock, shattering pieces into drifting fragments. "Shields up," Jake barked. "Redirect fire to the fracture lines." Mining ships swung into position, their heavy drills repurposed as impact cannons. They struck the cracks, breaking the asteroid further. But a massive fragment, still kilometers wide, broke free, tumbling straight toward the colony. Gasps filled the comm. Jake's jaw tightened. "That's the one. We stop it or we fail." He slammed his fist on the console. "All ships brace and ram." The crews hesitated. No counselor had ever ordered such madness. Kira's voice rang out, steady and clear. "You heard him. Together." Humanity's lesson. The mining ships surged forward, engines screaming. They slammed into the fragment, one after another, shattering their hulls but pushing it off course. Defense satellites fired in coordinated bursts, breaking the rock into burning debris. The fragment split, scattering into pieces small enough for the colony's shields to absorb. On the surface of Veli's Prime, millions watched as streaks of fire lit the sky, harmless meteors instead of extinction. On the bridge, silence fell, then cheers erupted across the comms. Jake slumped into his chair, exhausted, his hands trembling. Kira pressed her palm to his arm, her eyes wide with awe. "You did it," she whispered. He gave a tired smile. "We did it." The reckoning. Back in the council chamber, silence greeted their return. Delegates stared, stunned. Vaynar's obsidian face was unreadable. Professor Zactor finally spoke, his crystalline tone steady. "The humans saved 30 million lives, not with weapons, not with conquest, with knowledge, with cooperation." Voices rose in agreement. Even those who had feared Jake now murmured with reluctant respect. Vaynar's voice rumbled, low and bitter. "Today, perhaps, but tomorrow, what if his kind turns their survival against us?" Jake stepped forward, blood still on his bandages, his body weary but unbowed. His voice carried through the chamber like steel. "Then you've missed the lesson." He raised his chin, gaze sweeping across the chamber. "We are dangerous, yes, because everything that tried to kill us made us stronger, but strength isn't what defines us. Choice does. We chose to save Veli's Prime. We chose to stand together. That's what it means to be human." For a long moment, no one spoke. And then the chamber filled with applause, not the polite tones of diplomacy, but raw, thunderous approval. Weeks later, whispers spread across the galaxy. The Deathworld humans were no longer seen only as monsters. They were survivors, builders, teachers of resilience. Jake Morrison stood once more in the lecture hall of the university, this time to a crowd so large it spilled into the courtyards. He smiled, tired but proud. "Today's lesson is simple," he said. "Danger doesn't have to destroy you, it can make you stronger, but only if you face it together." Beside him, Kira smiled faintly, her fear finally replaced with something brighter. And far above, in the council archives, a single line was added to the record of the galaxy's history. From the death world came humanity, and with them, lessons that changed us all. Jake glanced at the stars beyond the dome, his smile crooked. "If they fear us now," he murmured, "wait until they see what we can build together."